Hey dudes, it's Llarold, and today I'm going to talk about how to play Protection Paladin in The War Within Season 3. So not a lot has changed with Paladin in the patch. Technically speaking, I think there's no entry in the patch notes for them, but this is still a good opportunity to check back in, see what's up, and see why and how you should play a prop Paladin in the coming season. Also, the change of tier set is going to shift the preferred hero talent setup, which shifts the playstyle quite a bit. It's a good bit more like it was in Season 1 when the class was tankier, arguably stronger on a relative basis, and I think that's pretty great news for prop Paladin, especially in Mythic Plus. And this video is going to be more focused on Mythic Plus as well, since that applies to more people. So that's the intro. Join our Discord in the description and say hello to me and Sunset. Alright, so as I said, the changes, there are no changes. We can just kind of move past it. It's okay. To be honest, the only changes that I think Prop Paladin should have gotten in the, absolute sense of balancing the game is some nerfs to their utility. Their group utility is just absolutely preposterous. Their tankiness is not preposterous. Relative to other tanks in Mythic Plus, it was kind of surprising. Playing some keys toward the end of the season on Demon Hunter and realizing this character has 30 less item level but feels more tanky than the Paladin, that's probably not great. But with the shift back to Lightsmith, I think that that's going to change quite a bit. So I think Prop Paladin's in totally fine shape defensively, but they have more group utility than any class in this game could reasonably deserve, and that's fine. They didn't get nerfed. We call that a win. I got into editing and I realized somebody's going to leave a comment saying I want Paladin to be nerfed. I don't want it to be nerfed. I'm playing it. Should it be nerfed? I don't know. They make the game. I just play it. Alright, so let's talk about the tier set. So the new tier set, the Vows of the Lucent Battalion. Basically, this is a tier set that has different sets of bonuses for Templar and for Lightsmith, and then doesn't really have different sets of bonuses for the different specs. It kind of does, though, because, the different hero talent setups do work differently, whether you're playing Ret or Prod or whatever. Ultimately, this tier set just lends to being Lightsmith in Raid, in Mythic Plus, and so on. Now, if that changes, I think we'll probably just do an update, but right now I'm just really going to talk about the Lightsmith bonuses, because you can look at the Templar bonuses. I think they're very fun. They let you throw out another Light's Hammer, but it just isn't very good compared to the Lightsmith bonuses. Starting with the two-piece bonus, Hammer and Anvil's damage is increased by 15%, and it can also be activated by Blessed Hammer at 40% effectiveness. On its own, this really isn't an amazing talent. So this is Hammer and Anvil. Whenever you crit with Judgment, you cause a shockwave, dealing some damage. This is a pretty decent bonus. It's just free damage. That's okay. Kind of all of the tier set bonuses in the coming season are just damage, but the 4-piece is where this really takes off. The 4-piece is really what makes this tier set bonus work. Hammer and Anvil, which you're getting a lot of extra procs out of the 2-piece, now grants a stack of Masterwork. Masterwork is a stacking buff that causes your next Holy Armament to cast one lesser version of itself on a nearby ally for each stack. So in testing, this is very overtuned. For a while, it was doing millions and millions of DPS. Even with that being nerfed down to a reasonable, balanced down to a reasonable level, this is a very, very powerful bonus. There's a 5-stack limit on Masterwork, and when you overcap, you don't just waste those charges, you just automatically throw out weapons. You're going to be using Holy Weapon or Holy Armament fairly often, so you're going to be providing this bonus to everybody in the group pretty frequently. You're going to have pretty good uptime on the Holy Armament buff. It's going to add a lot of extra damage to everyone in the group, and that's great, right? Few other tanks can say that they're adding damage to everybody else. It'll ultimately be calculated back to you, so really it's just a damage buff, but it does really fit thematically with Pally's whole thing of buffing everyone and group utility. Alright, let's move on to talents. So we're kind of just going back to using the standard Lightsmith talent setup that we were before. There's a lot of wiggle room in the left half of the tree. If you don't like Lightforged Blessing, for example, you can play around with stuff like Lightbearer. I think in Mythic Plus, I don't think you need it. I think just taking basic Blessing of Protection is fine. You can take Imp Bop if you really want that extra minute cooldown off of Spell Warding and Bop. You don't have to have Bop. I think it's just nice to have to help with fixates or removing bleeds or just keeping people safe in situations in Mythic Plus. And then another one that's not always mandatory, but I really like just for kind of getting between packs is Unbound Freedom, being able to have just like a built-in move speed increase. Like you actually are extremely mobile on Prot Paladin these days. Maybe not quite as mobile as you would be as Templar. That's maybe the one downside of switching to Lightsmith, but you know, I think it's ultimately worth it. So the left half of the tree's got a lot of group utility. You know, you've got Bop and 1 minute sack and Dispel. You're doing really well. In the right-hand side of the tree, we have a lot of our old favorites, a lot of really good defensive talent options, things like Barricade of Faith, Spell Wording, obviously. We're still using Avenging Wrath. They nerfed Sentinel so hard at the start of the expansion that it's just pretty much unusable these days, but that's okay. Strength and Adversity is still just insanely strong from Season 2. I cannot believe that they've let Prot Paladin get away with having just a baseline 15% parry buff all the time in Mythic Plus, but they're sticking with it. This typical configuration of talents down here in the bottom section of the tree is just really, really, really good and really normal for being tanky in Mythic Plus situations. You know, Eye of Tyr has great synergy if you're playing Templar. Of course, that's like your main cooldown, but even if you're just playing Lightsmith, it's still just a really good defensive cooldown. And that's a kind of another thing that's nice about Lightsmith is you're able to just use Eye of Tyr more as a defensive cooldown instead of something that you have to hit on cooldown for offensive purposes. You're still getting Final Stand, you're still getting Righteous Protector and Resolute Defender, so you're getting cooldowns that are coming off of cooldown very frequently, and Final Stand is giving you just the greatest defensive cooldown in the entire game. Now, one thing that I think is pretty much standard is to run Tyrion's Devotion and Faith in the Light. That gives you that block chance, 30% block chance when you cast Word of Glory. This is a really normal setup. You can use this in conjunction with the block chance from Barricade of Faith and then just block chance from Mastery to have 100% block chance to guarantee that you block certain boss skills. This is really important. If you're doing easier keys, which I often find myself doing, you can actually just spec into like Sanctuary and Consecration and Flame. This is a little bit more quality of life. Like you lose that incredible defensive cooldown of pre-wogging before a hit, which is dumb. And then you just don't have to cast Consecration as often. It lasts longer. It gives you that lasting buff when you leave, and then you can just throw a point somewhere else for some free damage. Seal of Reprisal is okay. Tears Enforcer I kind of like more. So this is a setup that I often run in Mythic Plus, but this setup is kind of the standard approach. And now I'll just briefly talk a bit about some raid talents. So if you're doing tanky stuff in raid, you're just trying to stay tanky, you know, difficult raid stuff, you could just run the exact same talent setup as you would for Mythic Plus. It's very tanky. That is what I would do. If you're doing stuff that's more like, whatever, getting out there and getting some parses, this is the setup I would run. This is the setup I ran in Season 1, Narrowbar Palace. I didn't even bother with Eye of Tyr and Inmost Light. You can, but Moment of Glory, Farron Marcus's Fervor, like this is very much a setup that's oriented toward maximizing single target damage. I think the one thing I would maybe change is switching off of Hammer the Righteous to Blessed Hammer for a bit more synergy with the tier set. Other than that, this is pretty much the setup I would run for maximizing damage in raid. And then, you know, you can kind of do a lot of stuff piecemeal if you need. If you really do feel like you need Eye of Tyr, you can take it. If you feel like you need Final Stand, for some reason, you could take it. If you need Spell Ward, you could take it. You know, there's a lot of room to kind of peel talents away. Don't need Soaring Shield if you're in pure single target. Do need Soaring Shield if you're in AoE, that kind of thing. Before I even get into hero talents, I'll just start by saying Templar was the go-to talent setup in all of Season 2, and for the first few days of Season 2, you're probably not going to have a full 2 or 4 piece for the new tier set, so it would make perfect sense to just keep playing Templar the way you were before. I'm going ahead and switching over to Lightsmith because I like the group utility, and I really like the, I don't know, muscle memory, practice, whatever, of getting comfortable with Lightsmith for when I do have 4-piece, and it is significantly stronger than Templar, in addition to having much better group utility. But do what you like. All right, now let's talk about the Lightsmith tree. There are a lot of non-option talents, so we don't even really need to say much about those. Rite of Sanctification is a choice node. It's just clearly better than the alternative. Getting primary stat and armor is just very good. Divine Guidance and Blessed Assurance are both good. Blessed Assurance is like 200% increased Blessed Hammer damage. This is pretty good. I kind of like Divine Guidance a little bit more for the group utility aspect of getting like this big pop of damage and healing when you press Consecration. Doesn't mean that it's actually like better. I just kind of like that group utility value. You could definitely get away with just running Blessed Assurance for a little bit more consistent damage. Either is fine. Divine Inspiration is just clearly better than Forewarning. You know, you get a lot more Holy Armament procs out of this than you do like Holy Armament uses out of Forewarning. So, I mean, that just takes care of that entirely. And then you have an option here. You can run Authoritative Rebuke. This does actually result in a lot of cooldown reduction on your Rebuke. If you're making good use of Avenger Shield in cast or heavy pulls, you can actually cut that cooldown from 15 seconds down to like 10 or 12. And that could be pretty good. But it isn't maybe as good for like scary situations as using Tempered in Battle, and then you have a Sacred Weapon on somebody, and now they drop low, or you drop low, and it sort of soul links each other together, you know, distributes the health evenly. Like, that's really quite nice. Also, just the Holy Bulwark component of any overhealing gets transferred to the ally is just really, really awesome. Like, it's super, super strong. You basically turn Holy Bulwark from being like a good defensive cooldown on an ally into like, it's really, really, really hard for that person to die. I'll just mention Valiance. This is a good justification for using Shining Light, for using those free heal procs as a way to get more cooldown reduction on Holy Armament. You don't want to burn your mana out, but this is like a good justification for hitting those Words of Glory for free on yourself or on other people. And that actually has pretty good synergy with the like overhealing out of Holy Bulwark as well. That can be kind of useful. And then Hammer and Anvil, that's the thing that makes the whole tier set work. It's kind of the reason that we're playing Lightsmith again in the first place. You know, I really like Lightsmith. The main thing that I would say you kind of have to keep in mind when you're playing it is if you have an Avenging Wrath coming up, you want to make sure not to cast a Sacred Weapon. Like, you want to make sure not to cast it ahead of the Avenging Wrath. You want to make sure not to Avenging Wrath and then immediately Sacred Weapon. That does waste uptime because of that capstone talent. All right, now let's talk about the Protection Paladin rotation. So it hasn't really undergone any significant changes in the last several years, and that's totally fine. It's kind of old reliable, like I really don't mind that. It's a pretty good rotation, so it doesn't really need any huge changes. It's fine. There are a lot of basic principles that are still the same. You want to maintain Consecration all the time. You want to maintain Shield of the Righteous all the time. Those are unchanging. You also want to use all of your cooldowns as often as possible within reason. You don't want to pop wings right at the end of a pull or right before a boss goes immune to damage or something, but otherwise you want to use them as much as possible. Eye of Tear is something you'll want to use as just kind of a defensive cooldown if you're playing Lightsmith. It can be good for gathering stuff up, though, at the start of pulls in Mythic Plus. If you're playing Templar, you want to be hitting that and then Hammer of Light on cooldown pretty much the whole time. As for Holy Bulwark and Sacred Weapon, if you're playing Lightsmith, you never want to sit your Holy Armaments on cooldown on 2 charges, just sitting there being unused. That is definitely very wasteful, but you don't need to just jackhammer it on cooldown either. If you're overlapping your wings and your Sacred Weapon casts, that is bad. That is a waste. So you don't want to do that, but putting Holy Bulwark out pretty frequently, especially on anybody who gets, you know, targeted by monsters or fixated or has some sort of channeled skill on them, that's a really, really good way to add a lot of healing to somebody, basically just helping the healer with priority healing on somebody who's getting blasted. Beyond that, you want to keep Judgment and Hammer of Wrath on cooldown all the time, then Avenger Shield, and finally fill with Blessed Hammer. Pretty basic stuff. You know, that's Prot Pally in a nutshell. Very simple, very, very powerful class. As for your preferred stats, you're going to want Haste. That's your primary, secondary stat. You know, you want as much strength as possible. Just getting item level increases is going to be the most important thing. Then Haste. Then there's kind of some debate as to whether you want as much mastery as possible or if you want more crit or verse. It kind of depends on whether you're trying to maximize your damage or your defensive reliability. Mastery is definitely better for more tankiness. Crit is going to be better for more damage. Ultimately, you're going to want to sim yourself and see exactly how they all break down, but usually it goes haste, crit, verse, mastery for damage, and then for tankiness, that's a little harder to model, but haste, mastery, verse, crit. All right, that pretty much covers it. Paladin is great. I'm definitely going to be maining it at the start of the coming season. I really have had a lot of fun playing some other tanks again recently. Demon Hunter has been surprisingly fun, but nothing really compares with Paladin. I have to say, just based off of like Sunset's experiences of healing me in most of our groups, sometimes DPSing with me, but you know, most of the time she's healing. She really prefers when I'm on Paladin. The amount of group utility that you provide, the amount of like spot healing you could do so the healer can help DPS or do other utility stuff throughout the run, the amount of interrupts that you give to the group as a prop Paladin is just unprecedented. As good as Demon Hunter is at providing AoE crowd control, Prop Paladin is just significantly better at dealing with interrupts. A Prop Paladin can pretty much just solo interrupts in most dungeons for the group, no matter what. And this is really good when you're playing with random groups of players who you don't know. They may be good, they may be distracted, they may have whatever, they may just be bad, right? Like, you don't know why they're not interrupting, and if you're on another tank, that might be a serious problem, but on a prop paladin, it just isn't. It's just so strong in dungeons, especially with less coordinated groups. You're able to cover up pretty much all of the mistakes that other players make, especially with Templar kind of going by the wayside and getting replaced by Lightsmith here in the coming season. You can really just carry people. You can carry healing if you need to. If the healer disconnects or dies for some reason, you can res them, but you could also just heal while they're not there. So it really is quite strong, and it really just feels like you're doing what you're supposed to do. Whereas on a lot of other tanks, if you're trying to heal the group as a bear druid, it really feels like you're committing a crime. All right, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and join the Skipping Sleep Studio Discord. We have over 800 people in our community, so jump in and say hello to me and Sunset if you haven't already. And finally, thank you to all of our channel members. If you want to support us so we can keep making more WoW content, become a channel member as well. Thanks for watching. Bye.